Well, here we are again, everybody, at the end of summer, and we are officially in fall. Angela, how's it going?
It's great. The weather is amazing.
I know. I've had the windows open.
I know, me too. Yeah, driving here, for a little bit, it gets a little
I'm talking
noisy.
like in the house.
Oh, yes,
At night?
of course. Yeah, doors open, windows open.
Oh, it's great. And then
Feels great.
this is why everybody's moving here.
I know. This is it, guys. This is what we wait all summer for.
That is.
And we have so many months to look forward to, right?
No, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great. And that's why people love moving to Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are with another episode of the LOCKBOX, brought to you by the Grandon Group, Arizona's #1 brother and sister real estate team. So, Angela, what's going on in the market today?
So the market is still really hot. Lots of buyers still trying to get into homes. I would say that as far as rates go, they are still low. If you are looking to buy or refinance, now is definitely the time to talk to somebody, because I don't know how much longer the rates will stay as low as they currently are.
So, everything's crazy out here right now. We got so many people moving here from out of state and everything else. So, and that kind of leads into our next guest. Yeah. So, it's important that when you live here, you get involved. And it doesn't mean you have to get deep into the politics or the schools and all that, but it is important that you get involved in your communities, because it has a direct impact on the value of your home.
Absolutely.
So, and every area has a different personality and stuff like that. So, over the course of the year here and stuff, we bring in different people, and we've had a lot of people that are running for different offices. Yeah. So today, we've got a really cool guy. I consider him an Arizona native, even though he's from Michigan, because he's been here so long, and he's done a lot of great stuff, especially, grew up on a horse ranch.
Yes.
And so we've been involved with the horses and the wildlife and the different boards that deal with animals and stuff. So Mark is a really great guy for that. So here's Mark Finchem. He is running for Secretary of State of Arizona.
Well, welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me on the show.
How's it going?
Couldn't be better. Could not be better.
So Arizona
like
Secretary of State.
Yes.
So you retired back in the late 90s after being a firefighter, right?
The first time.
The first time.
So 21 years in Kalamazoo, Michigan. They actually have a combined police, fire, and EMS system. Oh. So I was actually in all three disciplines: level 3 paramedic, firefighter, and primarily law enforcement. Had 21 great years with the city of Kalamazoo, and decided that I didn't want to have a snow shovel permanently attached to my hands. So got rid of the snow blower, the plow, all the stuff that has to do with snow. Moved here in 1999.
Wow. How do you like Arizona?
I love Arizona, man. I love Michigan because it's so green, but I love Arizona because it's so brown.
Well, so 99, so we've seen a lot of changes.
Lots of changes.
Lots of changes.
Yeah.
So you had 49 other states to pick from. Why'd you pick Arizona?
There was a job opportunity. I bid on a job with American Airlines, and they flew me down here to their Southwest Reservation Center in Tucson. And within 20 minutes of getting off the plane, I could take the deepest breath that I had taken in years.
Wow.
I was injured a number of times as a firefighter before I'd cross-trained in law enforcement. And so with adult onset asthma, firefighter's asthma, I guess is what they call it, I could take deep breaths within 20 minutes of getting off the plane. I was like, okay, I think I can live here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, and so many things, just opportunities opened up to me. It's like, okay, this is a good decision.
So what'd you do when you get off the plane? What was the first job?
The first job was taking reservation calls for American Airlines. And I can sum that conversation up in like 3 seconds. What's the cheapest fare from here to there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I did that for about a year and a half. And after having a very active lifestyle in the ranching world, farming, law enforcement, working midnights, call to call, never knowing what's going to happen, the mundane desk job just did not work out well.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you decided to run for House.
Some years later, I was invited to fill a position. They had a vacancy because the gentleman was running for Congress, and I got a call from a very respected state senator in the state, and he said, we're about to have an opening in the House of Representatives, and we'd like you to consider running. You're on our short list. I said, Okay, how many people on the short list? One.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay. I said, well, what got me on the short list? He said, well, we're looking for somebody who has broad-based experience, who is not the kind of person who will sit down and shut up when people tell him to. And he knew me pretty well. I'm not the kind of person who is just going to be bullied into being quiet. That's why it's interesting looking back on my legislative career. We now see that coming full circle with the cancel culture and the sit down and shut up brigade.
Right.
That want people. They want consensus. They don't want exploration. They don't really want to follow scientific process. They just want you to follow what they tell you to do. So, for example, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about masks in schools.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I do find it rather curious that the EPA, not too long ago, convinced a federal judge that CO2 was a noxious, poisonous gas. Yet the CDC is forcing, through their mandates and whatever, forcing school children to wear masks that increase the amount of CO2 that they breathe.
Right.
My recommendation to parents, go to Amazon, buy yourself a pulse oximeter, have your kids wear it, and when it drops below the recommended oxygen saturation level, have your child raise their hand and say, I need to take this mask off so that I can reoxygenate my blood.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And you have one, don't you, Angela?
Yeah, we ordered one from Amazon.
How much?
Oh, gosh.
A couple of bucks?
Yeah,
I mean, medical technology's
It was very
gotten cheap.
inexpensive.
Right.
I would say I don't recall the price, but it was very inexpensive. And we did it honestly when COVID started becoming something that they were talking about out there. So we ordered it just for just to be able to check, because that was
just in case.
Just in case. So it's interesting you
Well,
bring
we're
that
pretty
up.
lucky,
We've
too.
used it.
Arizona's open state for the most part, and that's why we're getting so many people moving here.
Yes.
But it's also one of the main reasons it's important to get to know people that are running for different positions.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and when we'll get into more stuff, but one thing that I really love about Mark, being in the horse industry and all that, is you're really into wildlife. Mm-hmm. And
into protecting wildlife.
And in protecting wildlife. Now, I guarantee you're going to get calls. Then, if you're into protecting, why do you go hunting? And a lot of people that don't hunt don't realize that if you don't go out and hunt deer, they're going to end up getting rabies. They end up dying. So you have to kind of.
I think they call that culling the herd.
Right, culling the herd.
Okay.
And so a lot of people don't realize that, and so it's not
Interesting.
inhumane.
Yeah.
It's inhumane if you don't do it properly.
Well, and so in Michigan, where I originally came from, this time of year, coming up into, deer hunting season starts November 15th.
Okay.
That's not by accident. That's about the time where they're at maturity. And the last number that I heard, and this was a few years ago, they'll take 2.1 million deer in one season.
Wow.
So think about this for a second. Deer ravage crops.
Yep.
They'll go out into the cornfields and just wipe the cornfields out.
Wow.
Not to mention the vehicular damage that happens when you go head to head with a deer. There's not much left of the front of your car.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, it makes quite a mess when you're at 55 miles an hour and you hit something like that. So, it's the fact of the matter is we are in a populated society. So we see the same kind of thing here in Arizona. Now, I'm concerned about our elk herd. That's why we draw tags. That's why we have different seasons for different reasons. Bow season, black powder, rifle, and all of that is to try and balance a healthy herd of wildlife, and at the same time fulfill the needs to keep sharpened skills, as they say.
Absolutely. So you were a founder of a natural wildlife refuge or something you had something to do with natural some of the bills and that a while back? Well,
I've been supportive of bills that help to protect habitat. One of the things that just really drives me nuts is you have a number of organizations that claim that they are out there supporting habitat when in reality what they're doing is they're claiming a national forest program that creates a tinderbox, which turns into an inferno, which burns wildlife to death because they can't get out because the trees are so thick that they can't move through the forest.
Right.
So if they really cared about wildlife habitat, we'd have, and I'm glad to see that we finally have some of this work going on, we'd care about the proper management of forest. It deals with, it's called treatment, but at the same time it's essentially thinning of brush and undergrowth, which creates fuels. I mean, that's something firefighters on the line always are concerned about.
Right.
When you have dry conditions, you have fuels. When you have ladder fuels, you have crown fires, and you burn 600,000 acres in a go. Wow. And when you consider, I think the last number I saw was approximately 4 wild creatures per acre. And you burn 600,000 acres. Who's really caring for the wildlife habitat? The people who are trying to prevent those fires through thinning and proper forest management, or the people who just say, no, we're just going to no burn, no harvest, no. Okay. You know, one of the things that was a practice in the Tucson area when the Hohokam Indians occupied that area is I believe it was in the spring when they left for higher ground, cooler ground. They would fire their huts. They would fire the grasses, just burn it. And when they returned in the fall, they'd have this green, lush, insect-free. Yeah. So to say that,
it's very interesting.
Natural. Well, okay. Man has been managing their environment for a very, very long time.
Right.
So to pretend that, the Native Americans and the folks that were here long before the Europeans were here, that they didn't have an active hand in managing the environment, that's false.
Right.
It's fake news.
Right. So this is one of the things that Mark fits in perfect. I consider him you're kind of a cowboy.
Kind of.
I mean, you fit the role. Excellent.
Sort of.
I saw his hat. He walked in with.
He did. We tried to get him to wear it in here and stuff.
You don't wear your hat inside.
So there's so many different positions where you can really make a difference in the state. So why did you pick Secretary of State?
Well, as you may recall, at the end of last year, November 3rd, we had an election that very few people thought was legitimate. In fact, the day of the election, my email and phones blew up at the state capitol with constituents demanding that somebody look into what the things that they had observed, the things that they were reporting. Everything from Sharpiegate to ballots arriving days after the election, and just some anomalies that people couldn't explain, and there was this cognitive dissonance between what they expected in an election and what they've observed in the past versus how this past election was run. So based on those, I don't want to say complaints. Some of them were complaints. Most of them were observations that they shared with me and with some of my colleagues. I reached out to the Speaker of the House and asked for authorization to use House resources to hold a public hearing, which is not unusual. We have ad hoc hearings all over the state all the time. Just that's what representatives do in a representative form of government. You listen to constituents. It's not rocket science. And I was not given authorization to do that. So I said, okay, well, my constituents are the ones who elected me, not the Speaker of the House, not the governor, not the Secretary of State. So pulled a few members together. I think our total was 8 plus me. And we sat down and listened to evidence that was not let into the courtroom, namely the Rudy Giuliani team for the Trump organization. We invited members of the community to come in and tell their story. I think the biggest piece of that was people wanted to get something off their chest. They wanted to ask questions. They wanted someone to scrutinize the election that they thought there was a problem with. And at the end of the day, the election belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to government. That's something that I think some government folks forget.
Right.
This is about consent of the governed. And along with that consent is the right to question. I think there's a First Amendment connection there someplace. So it was during that process, 14 days later, the hearing was on the 30th of November. 14 days later, the Senate convened a formal hearing. And one of the guys that I think truly is you don't hear much about Senator Eddie Farnsworth, but he is a hero. He had a 6-hour hearing and issued subpoenas. And just through that whole process, it became very clear to me that the current Secretary of State had no interest in accuracy in the election.
Right.
And, upon digging, found that she had said on more than one occasion that she thought her job was to get as many Democrats as possible into office. No, the Secretary of State, once elected, really needs to shift gears and be as nonpartisan as possible, because that Secretary of State is representing the interests of the state,
Right.
not the interests of a political party. So in that time, as time progressed, watching this whole thing play out, knowing that I was termed out, Arizona has term limits, and this will be I'm coming to the end of my 4th term. I was ready to go home. And a number of people said, look, you know more about this than just about anybody in the state. You've been all over this like a pup on a pork chop. So how about you think about running for Secretary of State? And of course, there was lots of discussions with the family, and
That's what I was going to say. Like, how do you have that conversation after you've already done so many terms, and then now you're jumping into something, that's going to continue to take a whole lot of your time, I can imagine.
Yeah. I think once you get past the word seriously, and you can enter into that conversation, because I was already getting my teeth kicked in. I mean, the radical left, I was a realtor for 14 years. And over the last 2.5, 3 years, the radical left destroyed my business. It wasn't enough to compete on the political battlefield.
Right.
They recognized, I think, that at some point I might go to another level of office. And I was like, we got to take this guy out. So they destroyed my business. They called me a bigot, a homophobe, every phobe you can imagine. Apparently, they've never seen a picture of my family in totality. I think we have 5 different nationalities that are represented in my family. So, it's all patently untrue. The fact of the matter is, God built me with a heart for service. And I've done well in my life. I'm the kind of person who I'm content with the way life is. We're well provisioned. I don't need a lot of money to be comfortable, but I do believe in giving back to my community. Always have. Tried to show my kids when they were very young that volunteering to be on the fair board and those kinds of things don't just happen.
Right.
And I really like the way you opened the show. You've got to be involved.
Absolutely.
And if you're not involved, you're the one that's at fault for things not happening.
Yep.
So I've always tried to recognize that in my life and make sure that as challenges came up for the community, somebody's got to answer the call. Now, you have some people that go in the military. You have some people that go into law enforcement, firefighting. In my capacity, my former life, I swore an oath, February 28th, 1978, to protect our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And right now, we have a domestic enemy that is inside the wire.
Yep.
So that led to my decision to run for Secretary of State, understanding that if we don't have fraud-free elections, a transparent system, and protect the right to scrutinize, we no longer have a free society.
Absolutely.
And I have enjoyed being a free man for 64 years. I don't want to change that. I want to see that for my grandson, for my granddaughters, for my children, for those that aren't even related to me.
Right.
For those that come to this country, whether they're here legally or they come here illegally and get a amnesty or whatever might happen. It's the people who make up the fabric of this nation. If they don't have the protected right to give their consent to be governed, this nation has failed. And I can't abide by that.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think we're one of the best states in the country because of the way things are running. So that's why we need guys like Mark to stay involved. Yeah. The Secretary of State does more than just cover elections, so don't they handle other kinds of important things in Arizona?
Well, there's a number of things. So there's curation of records. There is, and elections, by the way, is probably the largest portion of the work that gets done.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have 15 counties that administer elections. Secretary of State's office is supposed to enforce state statute that's been put into place by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. Our current Secretary of State doesn't really like that program and tries to override that with some of the things that show up in an election procedures manual. But to your point, it's registration of lobbyists and the processing of the interaction between states for voter registration.
Right.
So, for example, there's a number of systems that cross-check individuals who move here from another state. Are they registered to vote in that state? Do we notify the other state that they're now living here? What are those things? That's just one example. But a lot of it is tied to elections.
Right.
So the lobbyist registration piece, lobbyists have to report who they represent, the amount of money they spend on certain things. So there's a little bit of a regulatory compliance thing that goes on. Of course, they protect the state seal. They look after a number of things that have to do with the administration of state affairs. But that is not to be confused with the Department of Administration.
Right.
That department responds to the governor, and it really is the get her done part of government. Yeah, so Department of Revenue, all of those things that happen as the money comes in, the money gets paid out, the things that are authorized in law happen. That all happens in the Department of Administration. In the Secretary of State's office, it's a much smaller area of influence, but I think it's every bit as important.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Without a doubt. So, and these are the things that kids these days aren't learning. I mean,
right.
You can't go out on the street right now and ask somebody, "Hey, what's Secretary of State do?" They'd be like,
"Yeah, I have no clue."
They take notes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Maybe.
I know. Maybe.
Well, and to your point, that is one thing that I think the Secretary of State could play a much larger role in, and that is to make sure that our school children understand how a bill becomes law.
Right.
Yeah.
How important it is to be a participant in the electoral process. What are the three branches of government? What are their functions? Allegedly, we're teaching children that, but I question, when you stop the average teenager and ask them, do you happen to know who the governor is? Do you happen to know what a bicameral legislature means? I mean, you might as well be talking Latin to them because they have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely
fair
right.
to say, yeah.
And these are the things that make the state great when you
Right.
have good leaders and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, Mark, tell us about you, because I know a lot of people are like, okay, we know he's running for Secretary of State, but so who is Mark? You're married. You've been married a long time.
Mm-hmm. Strong conservative. I believe in all of the protections, the rights and responsibilities that are laid out in the U.S. Constitution and in our Arizona Constitution. I am a Second Amendment supporter. In fact, I think I'm now limited on the number of guns in our house, just because the safe is full. I'm a sportsman when I can be. I haven't had the opportunity to go hunting in quite some time, but had a trip up to Alaska that was just a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, you were sharing that earlier.
5 days.
Oh, what was he sharing there, Angela?
It sounded
was it
amazing.
Some recipes?
Yes, so there was a recipe included.
Yeah. 5 days on the Kenai, Cook Inlet, Kenai River, and the Kenai Peninsula was glorious.
Yeah.
3 days of Arizona-type weather.
Yep.
Wow.
In Alaska.
Right.
And the guide friends that we were with said, could you come back this time next year and drag this back with you?
Yes, bring us
but
the
we
good weather.
had a great time. It's really quite a thrill to catch fish after fish after. This is actually catching, not fishing.
Yeah.
I probably caught somewhere between 50 and 60 Dolly Varden and rainbow trout over a 6 or 7 hour period. I mean, it was constantly fish on. And,
Wow.
and it was funny because as we're floating the river, we're watching all the fly fishermen engaged on the shore, and they actually call that combat fishing.
Oh, wow.
Because they're shoulder to
Interesting.
shoulder
Yes.
and they're fly casting. And when somebody says fish on, everybody else is like, oh,
Yeah.
reel in, get out of their way. And then, of course, you're taking too long to bring it in.
Yeah.
Okay, these are fish that are dying anyhow.
Right.
You don't want to eat a red sockeye salmon up in the river. In fact, one of the longtime fishermen, who was one of our buddy guide guys, had fished the Bering Sea for 33 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And as he's helping us fillet the king salmon and the silvers that we had caught, I noticed he was taking the slimy stuff that people would usually rinse off with fresh water and rubbing that on the meat, on the fillet. I'm like, okay, here's a teachable moment.
Right.
Why? And he said, most people make the mistake of rinsing saltwater fish off with fresh water. In that moment, immediately the meat starts to decay. And
Wow.
that's why salmon caught in the Cook Inlet that is cooked without being rinsed with fresh water versus salmon in the store that gets when you go to the meat case and you see the steam,
Yeah.
not steam, it's the mist.
The mist.
It's fresh water.
Oh.
That's why it tastes like fish.
Yeah.
So when we got home, we had both halibut, the best fish on the planet, next to salmon. And at that point, you rinse the salmon off immediately before you cook it. Pat it dry, put it on the pan, and put it in the oven. I mean, that fast.
Yeah.
But the halibut recipe that I think you wanted me to
Yes,
bring up.
I do,
So
I
you,
do.
you cut it into chunks, and these are fillets that are probably, I would say 7 inches by 7 inches long.
Okay.
7 inches wide, maybe 5 inches long. Cut them into chunks that are maybe 3 to 2 inches large. Roll them in clarified butter, and then crushed up Lay's Southern Barbecue spicy potato chips.
This is what he was talking about, right?
Pop it in the oven for, gosh, I want to say about maybe 15, 20 minutes. You don't want to overcook it.
Right.
Because then you just got rubber. But put it in for maybe 15 minutes. And just as soon as you touch it and it feels firm,
Yeah.
take it out. Because it will continue to cook a little while. And, of course, you want to make a little extra because it is awesome for fish tacos.
Yes.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
making my mouth water right now.
Right. I know.
I'm getting hungry over here, guys.
Yeah,
It's
no kidding.
lunchtime, and yeah.
See, and
That's
so
great.
this is what we need. So you have somebody that
Yeah.
goes out and knows how to make something out of the land, which a lot of kids don't know these
Right.
days.
I know.
And
It's
so
incredible.
That is just like great.
Well, and
That is
I love
really
to
cool.
cook. So
Yeah.
I come from a family of chefs, and between seafood and meat, we're definitely omnivores.
Yeah. Well, when you were a
Yeah.
firefighter, you probably cooked at the firehouse a lot.
I actually was the house cook. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That is great.
Yeah.
That is great. So we wanted to mention something about the Book of Lesser.
The book of, or the Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate.
Right. Yeah. So what is
Yeah.
that about?
So we were talking a little bit about precinct committeemen in the state of Arizona, and no matter what political party you are a member of, and I urge everybody, no matter what your political stripe is, be involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's easy to get
with-
involved. It really
It
is.
is. But I am absolutely against one party rule, because what we're seeing right now is Washington, D.C. and the rest of the nation suffering under one party rule. There is no political discourse. There is no debate going on. You now have traded debate for consensus. And if you don't see it my way, then we're just going to throw you in prison, or we're going to ostracize you, or we're going to tell you to sit down and shut up. That is not how a healthy society works. So I encourage people to, check in with your local party You've got the Maricopa County Democrats. You got the Maricopa County Republicans. You got Libertarians. You got Greens. I'm sure there's a couple more. But be involved, and you can become a precinct committeeman. It is the ground level elected office in the state of Arizona. And in order to get on the ballot, you only need to have 10 signatures for your nominating petition. So if you don't have yourself plus 9 friends, you need to check yourself a little bit, okay?
Was my face on camera? I'm not sure. I hope not.
So I'm pretty sure that, what is interesting is we see people who raise their hand and say they want to do this, they suddenly reach out to their neighbors that they've never talked to before. Mm-hmm. And they find out, hey, we've got some things in common. So it really is, it's a community development thing that happens, and it's just organic. I mean, it happens when you put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. But the Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate is, it's an important book that I think every individual who loves freedom really needs to have. It's not terribly thick. I'd say it's maybe a half an inch thick, so it's a fairly easy read. But one of my favorite lines in it is when Plato is talking to Dionysus, the tyrant in Sicily, surrounded by all of his guards to protect him. And the question that Plato asks is, what harm have you done to the people that you would require so much protection? Have you seen Washington, D.C. lately?
Yeah.
It is an armed camp.
Yep.
And I'm not really sure if it's got the fence up to keep the criminals in. Some people get that in a day or two. Or if it's to keep the people separated from
the criminals, the
jokers that are imposing massive amounts of debt. I don't think the American people have any appreciation anymore for what $1 trillion is. We have now reached into at least, I think, 5 generations, and that is at our current ability to produce. So I'm a fiscal hawk. I firmly believe that for us to recession-proof our economy, government needs to keep their hands off of the dollars that are in somebody's pocket. The more money we can leave with the people and not expand government programs, because it always means government spending. And of course, government spending never goes away once you start having it.
Right.
Because then it's the argument is, well, you're going to kick people to the curb. No, they shouldn't have been on government spending in the first place.
Right.
Some of the programs we have are absolutely outlandish, and I voted against most of them. But I'm a fiscal hawk, election integrity hawk. I want to make sure that government stays. In fact, maybe the best way to explain this is I believe that the best government is that government which has the lightest touch upon people's lives. Live your life. Engage in commerce. Raise your children. Love your family. Don't let government be the substitute for that. Government is not a god.
Right.
Never will be. Government is a necessary evil to keep people separated, quite frankly. It's, if you stop and think about it, it's to keep people separate. The good doers, the evil doers, they need to have some level of protection from each other. So that's Mark's philosophy on government.
Hey, perfect.
Keep it small.
That's great.
You see, and I mean, we've got natural leaders here, so that's really important. Mark's really easy to get a hold of too. So for those of you that have questions, because I know you send me emails and they're asking questions which I don't know the answers to, reach out to Mark.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very excited. I mean, he called me back, which is awesome. So Mark, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Well, so if people want to know more about my candidacy, they can go to votefinchem.com. That's VOTE. F like Frank, I-N like Nancy, C-H-E-M like Mark.com. On the contact spot there, I've got lots of questions that are coming in about election integrity and the Arizona Ballot Integrity Project, which is something that is a brainchild that I have been working on with a producer of U.S. Currency. But if they've got questions, just click on contact, put your name, phone number, email address, give me a couple of comments about what your question is. Those emails come directly to me.
Wow.
Now, don't get frustrated if I don't respond immediately.
Right.
Because I am getting now somewhere on the order of 50, 60 emails a day.
Wow.
And every time I drive someplace in the state, it's at least 2 hours.
Right.
More often than not, 4.5.
Yeah.
And that's one way. So that I'm not driving and reading emails at the same time.
You know what's going to happen today? He's going to get
I don't do
emails.
that.
How do you cook that fish?
Yeah.
At the barbecue show?
I'm okay with that. I'm happy to.
Send me that.
In fact,
That recipe.
if need be, I will put a short video. Actually, I don't
You
need
should
to
do
put
it.
You
a.
should.
I don't need to. I can take this video link and
Yep.
put it on my website.
That's exactly it.
Perfect.
That's exactly it.
But there's a fundraiser coming up that I think people would maybe like to know about at the Scottsdale Gun Club.
Yep.
On October 14th. We're going to have Jenna Ellis.
Okay.
Love Jenna Ellis. Bernie Carrick,
All right.
former New York City Police Commissioner, was the commissioner during 9/11.
Yep, 9/11.
And just he's a cop's cop. And Eli Crane, running for CD1, former Navy SEAL Team 3, was his boss was Chris Kyle.
Oh, no kidding.
So Eli, that's the three headliners. Darren Mitchell, Leo Biasucci, who's the House Whip, and Sonny Borelli, who's the Senate Whip, are going to be hosting it. Tickets are for VIP tickets. They're $1,000 a piece.
Right.
Keep in mind this is a fundraiser to make sure that you have good representation in the Secretary of State's office. And general admission tickets are $500. Now there will be beer, wine, poo-poos, the hors d'oeuvres, but there will be an opportunity to have some time with talking to some of the leaders in election integrity. And I've been given to understand that there may be a door prize, a fully tricked out rifle
Oh, no kidding.
that's probably valued at about $2,000. So
I
there's
heard-
only one of them.
I heard ooze
So,
in the background.
Yeah, there's an ooh or two.
I'm a gun person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is great. And then for those of you that maybe can't afford 1,000 or 500, you can make any sort of donation, and
That's
it's
right.
important to get involved, ask questions.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, but you've got to get to know these people that are running. And Mark's
Absolutely.
awesome,
Yeah, good point.
and he's a cowboy and a wildlife fan, and really loves Arizona, which is
Yeah.
really important.
Well, and I'd also like to say one thing about the level of frustration that's out there right now. The Arizona Senate received its report last Friday.
Right?
It takes a while to digest some of that information and to really understand what is it that it's telling us. We know that we have thousands of fictitious voters in the system. Now the question is, how do we find them? What's the best way to go about that? And how do we pull those fictitious non-persons out of the system? The other thing that many people might not know is there are still components of the audit that were spec'd out, but because Maricopa County never complied with the subpoena, they're kind of hanging out there. And there's a special master, John Shattuck, former congressman, is the special master, and we will still see at some point the routers and the router logs, which that's a national security issue. If we saw penetration of the election from outside of the building,
Right.
that's an issue. And then finally, there is supposed to be some kinematic artifact review of the paper, which basically means as you shine it under certain light, what are the things that you see on the paper that you're not expecting? And is that a repetition? For example, ballots that were pre-filled out by a laser printer. We'd kind of like to know about that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the issue really ends up being, do we want accuracy or do we want speed? Everywhere I go, people are saying, I want accuracy.
Yep.
But we also recognize that it needs to be timely. So don't get frustrated. The Attorney General now has the report, and where there is evidence, I have every reason to believe that our Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, will pursue that with all zeal.
No, I think so.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a new Secretary of State here in about 11 months,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's
So,
the plan.
Mark, how can they reach out to you again?
So you can visit my website at votefinchem.com. That's VOTEFINCHEM.com. And all of my social media handles, from Gab to Getter to Twitter and whatever else is out there, we have a coordinated response when we put things out. You'll see it out there. But look, elections aren't free.
Right.
And getting the message out, people want to know, why does it cost millions of dollars to get your word out? Well, we have millions of voters.
Absolutely.
And with postage stamps at now, 58 cents a piece? we're approaching at least $1, if not more than that, to get a piece of paper from me
To one person.
to every voter, to one person. So
Yep.
just on that level, it takes a certain amount of money.
Absolutely.
And no matter what you do, I mean, one of the things that I've got a lot of folks who are donors that have done, they'll give $20, and you can click a button that actually says monthly.
Right.
Those monthly contributions really add up.
No, perfect. This is great. Hey, Arizona, you have to get involved. Doesn't matter what the politics are. You've got to get involved to keep this state great. Angela,
Yes.
how can people reach out to you?
Oh, sure.
You probably get a lot of calls just regardless.
Well, I do get a lot of calls for people looking to refi
Sure.
or to purchase a home. They can definitely reach the team at 623-979-5523 or by email at hendrickteam@vipmtginc.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks for coming down today.
Thanks for having me. It's
This
been
is
a
great.
pleasure.
No, thank you. You guys reach out to Mark, ask questions and stuff like that. For the rest of you looking to buy, sell, rent, you know Arizona's #1 brother and sister team is the Grandon Group. Reach out to us. We're always available. And we'll see you next time on The Lockbox.